Hi, Kevin.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good.
So we're going to go ahead and start. So Mike and Kevin, thank you for joining us. Just for those that are in, to give some background, I met Mike and Alton in Switzerland. And I think, Mike, the most interesting thing that you said to me about AI and what I've understood is that what can we do with it that sort of evokes our creativity and not to mimic what photography already does. And I thought the way that you were processing AI and also in relation to looking for different talents, especially in Africa, for those working in AI and its usage, this is an important conversation. And even most recently, I was on a panel in Dubai as it relates to AI. And my main thing was that AI is the revolution for photography, just as photography was the revolution against painting. But it doesn't mean that painting was devalued or it disappeared. It just, continued on and so forth. So what I try to encourage photographers is to use these tools in a way that we're being innovative, as opposed to just trying to mimic what already exists that you can do with the camera. So I'm quite fascinated to hear the conversation that you guys will be taking place, and to introduce yourselves, to talk about the work, and and I'm sure there'll be questions as it relates to this field. So I will hand it over to the two of you. Mike, you start, and then Kevin, you're next.
Thank you so much. Let me quickly share my screen. I hope I can manage to do this. Yes, here we are. So thank you so much for inviting us, Aida. It's a really big honor for me and us to be here, invited to talk at Africa Photo Fair. I am Mike. I'm the co-founder of the AI Art Magazine, and as you already know, I'm not an artist myself. I'm an observer, and today I'm here to share my observations, and I'm super happy that Kevin joined, and this Kevin Abosch is also here today. I'm going to introduce Kevin in a second, but first I want to take the chance to say a couple of words about the magazine that we are doing. So we are doing a print magazine on AI art, and one of the questions, like the most frequent asked questions that we receive is, why are you doing that? Why do you print digital art in a magazine? And what drives us is we want to document and archive this new genre and this rapid development that we are seeing. So here you can see the first two editions that we already released. The first one was with cover art from Emi Kusano from Tokyo. And the second one, the one on top, is with cover art from Kevin Abosch, who is also here today. We have always articles and interviews and essays in the magazine, and then we have an open call, which where we invite artists to share their work with us, and we have a jury to create the magazine. And to take this as a little ad break, the next open call will be in January, and we would be very, very happy if many of you could contribute your work with us. The guiding principle for everything that we are doing is we want to give access to this art form. And in addition to the print magazine, we started an online section on events and exhibition. We call it What's On. And we run events where we host talks and exhibitions. The next one is going to be in Mexico in December 13th, pretty soon. Looking forward to that as well. And we're currently building an artist directory where artists who are participating in our open calls can create a profile and share it. So I'm beyond proud to have Kevin here joining today. We know each other for some time now, and he's an amazing artist working in Paris, living in Paris. And I brought two images from our past. So above you can see us at the exhibition in Essen in Germany, where you exhibited Ines, the left image. That was a Reimagine Tomorrow exhibition, and on a panel at Global Fusion, one of the Global Fusion events in Paris, together with Chiara from Malpractice. So Kevin, thank you so much for joining and for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to field questions, because sometimes these things, you're asked just to go, but because I can speak without without any concern for when it ends. It's best that, Mike, you wrangle me a little bit and prompt me about what to talk about, especially lately, because I've been doing a lot of interviews about the implications of AI in photography. And so I'll be in the middle of a conversation here, and I'll think I already said something I didn't, just because you know, I gave an interview last week. So my brain is like mush lately from all the discussion, but I'm super excited to discuss it all with you here today.
Thank you so much, and yeah, and thank you for being here. And I think it's also like I'm going to ask a lot of questions to you, Kevin, but I think it's also a warm invitation to the whole audience. So whoever has questions,
Sure.
Please do not hesitate asking us. And if we can make this a bit interactive, I think that would be very nice. So we've prepared a couple of things that we can show, but we can also derail and talk about other things if it gets interesting conversation. So when we were working on our number 2, we had a leading question, and that question, a leading sentence, sorry, the sentence is: the relation between what we see and what we know is never settled. That is from John Berger, and he was an English art critic. You might know him from his BBC series or book Ways of Seeing, what influenced a lot how people think about images, art, advertising, and power. And that was, yeah, guiding us through our process of creating our number 2, and is also the guiding line for today. And one thing I wanted to quickly explain is, starting with number 2, we started to have topics on our magazine, and the topic for number 2 was critical intelligence. And this refers to artistic practice that use AI to question the systems behind images, their biases, their power structures, and their cultural assumptions. And it's about exposing how these technologies shape what we can see and also what remains invisible. And what we did, like, we were focusing all the articles and interviews about this, around this question, and the open call remains completely open. So there is no topic on that. But enough about the magazine. I'm, as I said, super happy to have Kevin here, and of course I would like you to get to know Kevin a bit better. So I introduce, and then I think you can talk a bit on your work. So Kevin is I can say you're a pioneer of digital and conceptual art, Kevin. Is it correct?
Sure. I was early working with machine learning. My background was actually microbiology and cognitive science, but I never really did much with that. I was sort of destined in my own mind to work within the realm of art. From a very early age, I looked up to artists as like alchemists, like magicians, because they could sort of seemingly take nothing and turn it into something of value, both cultural value and sometimes financial value. And I really wanted to sort of be part of that realm. And so, despite having studied science and technology, essentially my whole adult life, I've worked as an artist, and I suppose up until, well, for the first half, so I don't know, I think I've been identified as an artist since 1989. So what is that now, like 35 years? For the first 15 of it, I don't blame people for calling me a photographer, because I worked with cameras and I worked with photography, and I love photography. And that's something I'll probably say a few times, just because lately that notion has been challenged by those in the public who think that working with the machine in some way diminishes the value of photography. That's obviously something we'll discuss. But I always I just had this affinity for this little machine, sometimes Japanese, sometimes German, sometimes Swedish, but this little machine, and in a way I felt I didn't like that. I didn't like that my artistic practice was somehow dependent upon owning this machine. I like the idea that you could just pick up some mud and or chalk or paint or anything and express yourself. But nevertheless, it was the way that I not only expressed myself but supported myself, because in those early days, and I tend to forget this. I tend to forget that in the early days, when I realized that so in short, I wasn't a little rich kid who, had an expensive camera and and could afford to, buy film and process. And I say that because at the time I sort of resented those who were. I got over that, but I came from a family. We were in Hungary, but the cost involved with photography back then was so substantial. It was a limiting factor, but somehow I was so determined to work with it. I made it work. And a lot of my learning and experimentation was on the job, so to speak. And those were portraits. I had an aptitude, I think, for taking portraits of people if you look online, I'm sure they're visible somewhere, but able to sort of blast through the ego and present a person in a removing the masks and their identity in a sense, and showing just this kind of pure human, honest face. And so there I was, for better or for worse, working with photography. But I from the beginning, I didn't like being called a photographer, because I saw myself as an artist who just happened to work with a camera. I don't know about everyone out there, but I didn't want it to define me. Also, so let's say, by the early 90s, I was doing what any young artist does, and people tell you, well, you need to find a gallery, and you don't know what's expected or the best practice, so you go along with the program. And I didn't go to art school, so I don't know if you caught that. That's another thing. I didn't go to art school, and if you look statistically at all the successful artists, I mean, a large percentage of them did go to art school. So I was a little bit, I had my reservations about that as well. And maybe I felt something like an outsider artist. But over time, I found something that resembled a style. It wasn't actually an aesthetic style, really. That did emerge over much longer time, but it was, I looked at people who had really overtly stylistic aesthetics, and I thought, oh, that's so cool. I wish I had a style like that you could spot from across the street, or from a distance. But I think the thing that I had was more of a treatment of the subject. It was a conceptual style that, if one were really attuned to it, you might be able to recognize a work as being mine. After 10, 15, 20 years, an aesthetic did emerge, a visual aesthetic did emerge out of my practice, and that aesthetic, I think, had a lot to do with lack of money, meaning I couldn't afford lots of fancy lighting, and I had one light, which I always thought was funny, because what happens if you light something with one light? It throws a big shadow. And people would always say, like, oh, I just love the shadows. And in some of my early work, and I go, well, that's what happens when you just shine one light. You have one light here, you're going to get wonderful shadows. You put another light here, you get no shadows, or you get two, and they sort of cancel each other out. So it kind of
make a limitation to your style.
My entire practice was born out of limitations, and I started, when I started. I'm 55 years old now, and I was that part of that first generation that had personal computers in the house. Some of us, anyway. I mean, that aspect was a little more privileged than not. That said, I had like a used broken ass computer that I somehow managed to work, and computers were very limiting at the time. I limited in their abilities at the time, but I learned how to code, and I always kept a foot in the world of coding, which was a blessing, because even today I think of myself as being I'm on the. I mean, I think I'm on the bleeding edge of machine learning, which I didn't expect. I would have thought already at 45 or something, I'd start falling off, into old person ignorance. But with respect to the technology and as machine learning and art, I'm still pretty much up front. So in that sense, I was sort of a pioneer because I was very early working with computer vision and the interface between conventional photographic techniques, image making through optical mechanisms, and the computer. Can
I ask something? Because I just shortly read, I think you said you used AI before people called it AI. I think that is
we didn't AI back then. In fact, I can't remember the first time. I mean, we obviously knew the term. I knew the term AI and artificial intelligence. You learn about that from movies and literature, but serious academics, which I was not, but I was proximal to them. I was next to them. They always, it was machine learning. And we didn't call it AI. It was fuzzy logic at the time. We used what were called expert systems, which is you'd create a knowledge bank and then a system of applying that knowledge to a given problem. Pioneer in that sense. But it's funny because in some ways I feel like 30 some years later and not much has changed. You still start with data. The data gets massaged in some way by the machine, and with the goal of having an output. But with respect to photography, things went absolutely crazy in a great way in late 2014. So I just did a book. Of my work that I call synthetic work, and I'm talking specifically about what I call synthetic photography. Now, people have different names for this. Yeah, that's the book. And for those who understand how the underlying technology, that's great. Some people have some understanding of it. Some have no understanding, which I learned quickly when I did a show recently in Paris at Paris Photo. Some people don't realize they're looking at works that are synthetic. Others ask, what does synthetic mean? They say, what's the prompt? Because for them, it's just, you're using ChatGPT or Midjourney to just, throw in a prompt and generate an image. And this couldn't be further from my process. So like I said, in 2014, a Dr. Ian Goodfellow, he wrote a paper called Generative Adversarial Networks. And it was the earliest form of model building, image model building based on a data set of images. And we weren't really prompting back then. Everything got tagged. So, for instance, I might take these glasses here, and maybe I'll have 500 different pairs of glasses. And I want to, in a sense, teach the machine what glasses look like. So I would take a number of photographs. I might take 100 photographs of this pair from every conceivable angle, and I'll do that for all of them. I end up with maybe 500, maybe like 5,000 images of glasses, and I will tag them. I mean, I could go in and drill in a little bit more granularly. I could say, glasses, sunglasses. I could say the color, black, red, clear. Anyway, and then when it's time to, after the AI trains on all this data and learns what this thing called glasses looks like, you just say, generate me 10 glasses. And it's interesting to see what comes back. At the time, it was something that, if you were lucky, looked vaguely like some garbled glasses. And that was really exciting. It was really exciting to see the machine try to make sense of an object that it doesn't really understand. It doesn't really understand the nature of. But this technology, which was fresh in late 2014, early 2015, has just been improving exponentially, like by the week, ever since then. And now I don't need to tell you, you can, you can create absolutely photorealistic images using synthetic means today relatively easily. And so for me, for the first, I'd say 5 years, from 2015 to 2020, I was predominantly using my own photographs. That was a little bit of an ego thing. I didn't want to use public models. I wanted to be more, I wanted to feel more like something from myself. So I used my own photographs, existing photos, or I'd take new photos to create the data sets, which I would then train to build the model and then manifest images. But then over time, I realized that, and already there was discussion about copyright. There was a discussion about, well, where do these images come from? Where do all these images come from? The millions and billions that go up to make these public models that were starting to be developed. And this is where, it started already to get a little bit tricky. But I think a lot of the friction that still exists between the public. I wish I could see everybody here in a room and say, raise your hand, but I can't see anybody's faces too. This is really kind of bizarre. So it's like I just can't get a sense to like who in the room knows what, or usually I can just glance at everybody and kind of get a read of who's probably played with these tools or hasn't, or who has pre-existing biases for or against them. But anyway, I'm just...
Kevin, they can raise their hands virtually if that's what you're interested in. But most of them have, I believe, dabbled in AI.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's basically photographers looking into what is AI. This is the key element.
Got it. Well, this is great because listen, I again, been a photographer 35 years. I still work with traditional mediums, but what I'm loving this position I'm in right now because I get to have these conversations and my goal is to sort of break through a little bit of the confusion. So I understand, let's say everybody in this room, let's say every one of you, 200 of your images were, scraped off the web and aggregated into some image model by, take your choice, OpenAI, Midjourney, who knows, and that data did go into informing a model. Now, I understand, especially all of us having grown up in a world where we're told there's this thing called copyright, and the moment that you create something, it's your intellectual property, and only you can exploit it. I get that, and I get it with respect to if you see your image in a magazine and you didn't get paid for it or you didn't authorize it, well, yeah, that's not cool. And so something should be done, or if they're using it on a product. But I think a lot of the confusion is still, no matter how much people think they might know about the tech behind this, that to some extent, there is a collage process happening that in its crudest form, it's like, you see a cow in a field next to a house, and they're like, well, where did that cow come from? Whose photo of a cow is that? And whose photo of that's smoke? Like somebody must have had a photo of some smoke. And so in its crudest sense, you might think that, oh, these elements are just being composited together, but I think everybody realizes that's not the case. But then you might say, well, I did so many images of cows, and surely my cow, influenced the models. It does influence the model's generations of when it does a cow image. I bet, whether it's the snout or the eyes or the color patterns or the general morphology. But, it's much more akin, especially when you have a model with millions of images, billions for sure. But I mean, even at the level of hundreds of thousands of images. It's much more akin to how we learn and create mental models of what something looks like. So if I say to you, draw me a picture of an orange, and you have a lifetime of having seen an orange, everywhere since you're a child, and that all goes towards this mental model you have of what an orange is: the color, what it looks like under certain lighting conditions, the general shape, the deviations that are acceptable, where it still is, representative of an orange. And then I ask you, I say, okay, so here are all the pencils or paints or markers or whatever you need, and I'd like you to draw this for me now. And some of you will really be, I'm sure, make some really impressive drawings that are almost photorealistic, and it's like, wow, that's really like an orange. Some maybe not so fortunate. But if you, but the model, the diffusion model, for instance, that we use today, it's just a lot more adept at taking that, what they see what the machine sees in its mind, and translating that to an image. It does it really, 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 really well. But the process is quite similar to what how you translate the model in your head. And when you draw an image of a cow and it looks really good, can you imagine if I say, yeah, but you know what, that looks a lot like the cow that I took a photograph of, and I know you saw it in this book, and you saw it also in a museum, and so no, I want no, you can't do that.
So you would compare it more with inspiration than with copying, if I...
So I think, okay, first, yes. But two, there's something else at play here, and this is beyond what I want. It's not. For me, it has nothing to do with what I want or don't want. But it just seems that there are times in history where progress and technology, not the kind that diminishes our humanity, because, well, first off, all technology has the potential to diminish our humanity or expand it. But there's so much momentum behind it, and the stakes are so much higher than some photographer who's worried about their cow being used as part of a data set. We as artists, especially working with these tools, are sort of fighting a proxy war for everything we see in the newspapers. Every newspaper, every news show, it's all about AI. Because from the moment we're born, if there's one thing we know, every time somebody leaves the meeting, I get sad. I won't take it personally.
It's not leaving the meeting. It's just there's connection issues. Some people.
No, I know. I'm just joking. It's just I just want to convince you I'm human. So no, but anyway, no, because I do have some, I have developed some pretty strong feelings about this technology. For instance, and I'm all over the place here, and let me tell you, I really, Mike, if I'm going off, pull me back in, or anybody else, pull me back in. But the thing is, so I remember in 2023, I did a series of images. In fact, one of them is on the cover, Mike, of your magazine, that picture from Detroit with the fire, and there's a car on fire. I don't know if you have that up there. But I did a series of 100 images called Civics. Maybe show another one. Well, that's one of them. But these are at the time in 2023. Technically, this was already pretty remarkable that one could do this. Can you flip to another image, Mike?
I don't have any other images from the.
You'll show the cover of your magazine or something.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So I was posting a few of these. That image on the right is a riot at night in Detroit, Michigan, in the United States. It's my well, how I envision it. In another life, I would have loved to have been a photojournalist. So this was a lot of fun. I got to put myself right in the middle of fantastical civil disobedience. And now, I wasn't trying to fool anybody. First off, if you look closely at these images, there's no way you could be fooled, because you would see the visual corruptions if you were actually looking at it. But to my surprise, I'd put this stuff up on Instagram, and even an old friend of mine who was the editor of a tech magazine, who should know better, he looked at it and he said, Kevin, what you're doing is devaluing. I have to laugh. He said, you're devaluing real photography. And now he didn't say it because he knew I was a photographer, but somebody else said, no, sorry, he didn't say that. He did not say that, because he would not have said that. Someone else said, you're devaluing real photography. And he said, you should learn something about real photography, not knowing that for most of my life, I've been a photographer. But he did say that he was surprised that Instagram didn't take it down and flag it for, disinformation, misinformation. I did not say, hey, everybody, look, the shit's going crazy in Detroit. Like, no, I just was showing an image called Civics. And the reason I even thought about doing this this project, and hear me out, because if you haven't thought about this, I think it's time to. Someone mentioned earlier about the transition sort of from painting to photography, and the painters were livid when photography. Give me 1 second. I just have to let my son in. He's just back from school. This takes about 20 seconds. So hold on. Well, I can actually speak because
yeah, we should not let him outside. I also had a very funny experience with this magazine. When I picked it up from the printing house, the printer asked, like, where was this? I was not aware about this riot, and I was like, well, as a magazine on AI art, it's obviously
okay,
generated image.
So okay. I started to think about how, we were talking about painting. So painters were, livid when photography came on the scene. And they actually said, you can't trust photography. It's like, we tell the truth, the painter. When you see a painting of that boat coming in with the fish and people unloading it, that's truth. That's real truth, not what these photographers are doing. And well, they were afraid, and not to mention, you don't need any skill. You just take a thing and you push a button, and there you go. There's your new truth. And so they didn't like that. And one of the things that we can get into that later. My own experience with photography about being marginalized as well. Go to the galleries. Maybe I touched on that earlier. Go into the galleries and the galleries that I wanted to be in, they didn't want to deal with photography. Photography still wasn't really accepted in the so-called traditional art world. But let's talk about photography, which I love, which you love, we all love it. But is it not by definition a lie? Is it not a facsimile of reality, right? Do we know that? We can agree on that, right? It doesn't mean that a photographic image can't be imbued with plenty of honesty. But honestly, by definition, it's a facsimile, and we know that it's been weaponized, and it's easy to manipulate everything from the bias of the photographer, the bias of whoever's in the scene. And I started to think about that. I started to look at so many of these, Pulitzer Prize-winning works of photojournalism, whether it's in concentration camps in this country or refugees in this country, and the most human, heart-wrenching moments that have been captured with photography. And if you know anything about media, and you look at them and you start saying, like, wait a second, let me ask all of you, if you're protesting something, you don't like this politician or you don't like this manufacturer, and you're like, this is unfair, and all day it's 2 hours, and this is unfair, 3 hours, this is unfair, and then suddenly all the journalists show up with their cameras and the media pool. What do? You put that sign up a little higher, and you're a little louder, and then it's like, this is unfair, you put on a show. Because you know what to do. We know what to do when confronted with a camera, because that's the world we live in. We're photographed as active and passive participants from the moment we wake up in the morning. So it's understandable. That girl, do you think she really would have put the flower in the barrel of the policeman's rifle if she didn't see 3 journalists there with cameras? Did the holding the baby up to the sky? Really? That's a heavy baby up to the sky? No, you do that when the camera shows up. Then you're like, oh, no. And I don't mean to be cynical here, but somebody, Prince Bazenga is laughing. That's good. I made Prince Bazenga laugh. Anyway, but I'm dead serious. And I started thinking, like, wow, there's a performative aspect to this that is anathema to this thing called photojournalism, where you're not even allowed to retouch a photo. They go crazy if you don't like a little something in the back and you retouch it. They're like, no. You can mess with the contrast slightly, you can but don't go retouching your works of photojournalism. So I thought that this was a great comment on all of that. And I wanted to see if I could distill true human emotion, through synthetic imagery of things and places, things that didn't happen. But the biggest takeaway I think that I got from my friends and other people, and for the most part, it was well received. It was well received. Also showed in a museum at the National Museum of Victoria in Australia. In general, you know, on magazines like AI Art magazine. You know, but what I realize is that it's, what has it been, 20, 30 years now, at least 20 years, where we're sitting there, images streaming by at a ridiculous pace. We are expected to digest so much visual data that, you know, when you see something on Instagram, when you look at it, I should say, the question is, do you actually see it? And so I think people are looking, but not really seeing, okay? They're looking, and you know, as soon as you see the boat, and they, oh yeah, refugees, you know, oh yeah, earthquake in some part of the world, and we have so many presumptions and assumptions about what we're seeing even before we really have seen it. We just kind of look at it and we have an idea. It's one, you know, it's one of those. And it's understandable, because how do you process that much data? So one of the positive byproducts, while I have it in my mind, that's coming from all of this synthetic data, you know, people, you can get as dystopian as you want and talk about, oh, you know, we're not going to be able to believe what we see or hear anymore, and we won't, and we're already probably not able to, unless we learn another level of critical analysis of how to consume content and media. And I think that's a positive thing. Like, I don't know, I would rather not believe anything I see or hear than believe everything I see or hear. And I think we're at that point. I think we're, not all of us, but a lot of us, tend to believe everything we see or hear. So I think it's, in a way, a landscape full of synthetic media is not that awful a thing. Now, there's a whole other.
Can I quickly interrupt here, Kevin, because I think I would really like to show your ethical work, because we talked about that some time ago, and you said if someone asks or like starts thinking about why the hell is this ethical, then you're already happy, right? So
right. So I have a body of work that I showed at Paris Photo, and it's called Ethical Work. And if you're like me, the first thing I would be like, what? Ethical? How's it ethical? Whose ethics are we talking about? Like, that just makes no sense. And how can the work be ethical? Well, the idea came because every conversation I have about using the machine, not as a collaborator, I don't anthropomorphize the machine. It's a tool, but in using the tool, just like I would use any one of another bunch of tools I use when I make art, when I discuss this with people, you're always like a millisecond away from an ethical discussion. We already talked about copyright. Then there's the energy consumption, all those GPUs processing all this, you know, AI data. So there's everything. So there's climate issues at hand, environmental concerns, authorship, and then you know, look, I'm going to say it again. Just to reiterate, I love photography, and I get caught up a little bit too in the nostalgia of it all. You know, I have old cameras and I have memories of loading up film and not knowing what it's going to look like until I get it back, and not being able to just shoot, you know, 1,000 images because it doesn't pretty much cost anything, you know, but actually spending time and thinking about the image and the craft and the history, and, you know, but I just don't believe that the history of photography is over. And I don't believe that this work or the work or hybrid versions of it, where some is synthetic and some is not, I don't position this as something called post-photography. I don't like the term post-photography. Photography is a story that's still unfolding, and I think this is just another chapter in its story. And just because we haven't discussed it yet, people ask me, well, like, why is this photography? And sometimes before I even answer that at the show, I would say, well, without any context, without any biases, just look at this image here, and I'm just going to ask you a simple question: is it a photograph? And no, I said, is this is this of photography? And all of them, even the guys with the camera, the guy from the photographic museum, to my surprise, they said yes. Okay, then we got into it. Look, if the stuff starts with photographic DNA, right? And the final product is something that we understand through its visual language that's been built upon for 150 years as photography. Well, then how can it not be photography? Well, you say, well, photography means the light has to hit a what? It has to hit a piece of photochemistry? Does it, or photoelectricity? So, because does anybody remember? Are you guys all too young to know? But I mean, in 1990, I'm trying to think what year, but let's call it 95, somewhere in the 90s, people were like, oh, the digital photography, that's not photography. That wasn't photography either, let alone everything you take on your phone. And I said, and at the time, I remember saying, so photochemistry is somehow superior to photoelectricity. I mean, the point is that the light is interpolated, it's mediated always by something. And then people say to me, well, then everything's photography. Well, even if it looks like a painting. Well, no, because that's where the visual language vocabulary comes from. I mean, I'm still working this out of my head, but people say, well, how do you define pornography? And they say, oh, I don't know, but I know pornography when I see it. Well, you know what? I know photography when I feel it. Okay. And so this isn't about, and by the way, and this isn't coming to replace you. Okay, listen, if you shoot stock footage of candles on a windowsill, yeah, maybe you're going to be replaced. That's true. If you're just doing banal photos of like a girl having a coffee on a beach, you might be replaced by technology. But you know what? You're going to be replaced by technology in a number of other areas as well. But if you're an artist, a real artist, I don't think is thinking like, oh, I'm going to be replaced by this. It's thinking like, how the hell can I use this to do what I do even better? And it doesn't mean replacing your workflow either. It just means, how, and maybe you don't, but is there an entry point? And listen, if anybody, I'd find it hard to believe that nobody in here is using Photoshop and, generative fill. I mean, that's AI too. That's literally using the same technology we're talking about. You're just not making a whole image. You're just making part of your image, and even if you're just getting rid of a pimple, you're getting rid of the pimple, replacing it with synthetic skin. Now,
Kevin, can I quickly jump to that, because I have a slide.
I'm getting hot now. Now I can take off my coat. I'm getting hot. I get.
Yeah.
I'm like a yogi. I start talking about this stuff, and I'm gonna like spontaneously combust.
I give you 10 seconds. Because I would really like to add this, because I think it's super important. I mean, AI has huge impact on all different areas of photography, and there are many. And what we are looking on at the moment is like, we're talking about art, right? We're not talking about creating stock photography. We're not talking about commercial. We're not talking about all the other documentary. And I think this assessment of what is the impact of AI on these fields of photography needs to be made like area by area.
Good point.
But what we're talking about now is the area of art, and I think here I could not agree more with you than even if I used the word post photography on another slide, but I could not agree more. Like, this has no impact on photography. It's something different, parallel, extending.
And by the way, this little beef with post photography is not just my thing. I thought it was, but I've over the last couple of years, museum directors, media, heads of media art departments all over the world. I teach at the Angewandte, the visual arts school in Vienna. I can't find any academic who likes the term. Like, much to my, I thought this was already settled. It's not settled at all. Some guy wrote a book, used it. Everybody liked. I just said I am a bit cynical is not the word, but I think that half the time, at least, when people say post this or we're part of this, post internet, post that, I think it's about staking claim. I think it's about staking claim to something because you don't want to be seen as part of something else. I think this has more to do with like branding and positioning more than I think nomenclature within art is super important. I don't think it happens overnight. I think it happens over time. Probably there will be some nomenclature, some naming mechanism for aspects of what we're discussing here later on. I think a lot of people are rushing. A lot of people rush to define that early on. Just again, staking claim. Look at me. Look how clever I am. I've put a name to this thing that's happening. But we are very early. We are very early in all of this, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to interject in here just to give you sort of the whole point of why I wanted to have this conversation, because right now what's happening in Africa is that a lot of the commercial photography, and you have to look at the trajectory of photography in Africa, which been sort of at the mercy of the foreign gaze as it relates to like our stories. And when we talk about photojournalism, and I think the interesting point that you raised about what is truth, because truth can be perceived, we can have 5 photographers in the same location and they can each come back with their own truth, which has a lot to do with also, I think, cultural bias and what have you. And right now what's happening, to me personally, I think having like ChatGPT and AI, this is, I think, the most interesting thing that gives access to all. It's sort of like a leveler in a specific way. Now, the key challenge is the application of that. So you have to understand, in the context of Africa, we are just coming into, for example, when we look at photojournalism and we look at commercial photography, we are just entering into this international market. So what's been leading the conversation has been fine art photography. And the reason being is that because for us to capture reality and to express what we think is the truth for each of our countries, we have, there's a limitation on the freedom of what we can present. And this is why there's been such an influx of fine art photography coming out of the continent and going globally and going to museums and all these other institutions. Now, as it relates to the application of AI on the ground, one thing that I've noticed in Abidjan, and I think this is a reality across the continent, is that a lot of the commercial photography, for example, most of the billboards here in Abidjan, for example, they're all created by AI. So that means is that we're missing that opportunity for us to grow within that commercial realm. So that's one thing. And even the discussions that I had, when I was presenting in Dubai, is that there was somebody in the audience saying that her main thing was product photography. And she's like, what do I do next? And I'm like, well, consider that to be a field that you should transform yourself into something else, because the reality of it is, as you mentioned, stock photography, anything commercial, it's just simpler, because these agencies and these corporations, they're always, going to find the cheapest route to get what they're looking for. So for them, this is the approach. But where the opportunity lies, and the things that I've seen since this whole AI entry into Africa, is that a lot of photographers are not using it as a tool, as a creative tool, in order to have innovation, creativity, imagination, and reinterpretation, and to consider it as a tool, just as pressing a button. But within that context, and I was reading somewhere about Walter Benjamin, and this is a question I had for you, Kevin, is that because I know you said that the AI has perfected, and I've seen a lot of images that I find super fascinating, because starting from the lighting, the mood, the position, all that stuff. And I think like 3 editions ago, I exhibited one artist from Italy. And the one thing I noticed is that AI the eyes and the hands were the most difficult things to mimic. This is the same thing in painting, ironically, because in painting,
exactly.
If you see a painter who hides the hands, is because you're not there yet.
Totally, absolutely.
But now the technology has moved forward. But also my sensibility is that as humans, the difference between fiction and reality, sometimes you'll see an AI video. For example, right now, if you look at Instagram, it's all flooded with all these AI things. In the beginning, I know, like, for example, my father's generation, they were sharing this stuff, thinking that it was the real thing, but only those of us who understood that this is not the real thing. So, so it's almost like we are reaching to a point, I think, in visual literacy, where we have to learn new skills on reading into the images. But I think what William Benjamin was talking about was about the aura of the image. And do you feel that AI disrupts this concept entirely, or is it mimicking, or where does that stand?
Great question. Let's put it this way. I don't think AI gets in the way. It's the human's use of it that can get in the way, as usual. I don't think the technology itself is the obstacle. But if you're, I don't even want to throw out things like lazy. I guess I'm being lazy. But like, if you're a lazy practitioner who, maybe doesn't really have a strong vision to begin with, and in any realm doesn't maybe have a lot of practical skill, then you're probably going to trend towards some, AI slop mediocrity. That said, I think for those who work well with language, I think they're going to be able, I mean, look, when I create, I'm not putting in a prompt and generating an image and being like, look, everybody, I'm working in a feedback loop, sometimes 40 times, it can take a week with an image, not always, but, I spend a lot of time working back and forth with the machine. But for those, let's just say, who don't, I do think that those who have a knack for language and an understanding of how the computer understands language and how the model responds to language, they will have an advantage. That's why this term prompt engineer is so popular these days. And that's something that's fine. It's just not part of my practice. My practice is not about crafting a clever prompt, generating 1,000 images, and then curating the 10 best. That's just not how I work. It's more like, I'll start with a seed of an image and I'll expand. For me, it's like sculpting in a way. I'll start with a part of an image, and then I'll outpaint and then come back and in-paint and then style transfer. I use like 20, 30 different tools in my arsenal, whatever is needed, because people say like, well, which model do you use, or what platform do you like? I go, you know what? I use what I need to get the job done. Because that's really, I look at it like having a box of tools,
Yeah.
But that means that you are also inputting your vision and inputting your creativity in order to have like a different discourse. And most recently I saw, maybe Kevin, you know this, or Mike, I saw someone who was took like things from, I think, D-Day, if I'm not mistaken. It was like a set of black and whites, and recreate the story around it. I think, I don't know what artist this was, but
I saw that. I don't need it.
But this is my thing, is that it's just going back to the tools and what are we trying to say, and the one thing, and this is the one thing that I've noticed within the continent is basically the duplication of the reality as opposed to the deconstruction of reality, and finding this tool as a way to utilize for self-expression. And this is why, for example, when you look at photography, and whether you're looking at North, East, South, or West Africa, each region has its own aesthetics, its own visual language, but then within that, the provocation is also different, So for example, I know that in the West, it's heavily focused on fashion, fine art, colors, and so forth. You look at North Africa, it's heavy in black and whites and fine art photography, and the same for that. So, but now that we have this AI sort of insertion within it, all the things that you're raising, when you talk about folks talking about that's not photography, whatever. I mean, I've juried so many competitions, and I'm always the person in the middle between the photojournalist and the fine art photographer.
Sure, exactly, yeah.
Because there's always this conversation that photojournalism is not art and fine art is not photography, but it's like we're using the same damn tool, and the whole thing is what are you to say? And I think that's always should be the focus, and I think that's also your approach.
Absolutely.
I would like to take the chance, because I think this is super fascinating to see this range of how people or artists are working with AI in very different ways. So on Perry Photo, I took the chance and interviewed 6 artists, and I brought some snippets, and I think it would be very interesting to see the broad range of how they're working. So if you're okay, I would quickly share with you. So these are the artists. I talked to Boris Eldachsen. He's a German artist working a lot with psychology. Emi Kusano, she's from Tokyo. She did the cover on #1, and very interesting on what you just said. She also had a discussion in the interview, but also with she talked to Sam Altman about how difficult it is for her to reconstruct Japanese culture, because the models are very Western biased. We have Gunbrod with his artwork that was very controversial at Perry Photo. We can talk about this later if you want. Then Genesis Kai, who explores identity through synthetic alter ego. Maria Mavropoulou, who's examining how technology shapes relationships and visual culture. And Nice Aunties, who's building a complete new universe. She calls the Antiverse as a parallel emotional universe. And I brought 3 questions. And the first question was, how do you start your process? Like what Kevin was just saying, like how he's working. And so what is the starting point? Is it an image, a prompt, an idea? And these are the
I'm trained as a fine art artist, so I feel I always start kind of from the white canvas, and I'm trying to find out what's the best tool to use for my project. And I've been using AI quite a long time now, before it was like trendy. So the process usually starts with an idea, and then I use AI more like a lens to look inwards in the data set. So because AI is trained on all human creations, on all the visual culture that humans have produced, I use it as a lens to look into this data and the statistics in there.
So Maria starts with the idea, using AI as a lens to look into the data sets. And I also asked a Nice Auntie.
So my starting point is always about first coming up with an idea and a concept, especially what kind of story I would like to tell. And sometimes it comes in fragments, like when I am waking up in the morning, or when I'm in the shower, or doing something totally random. An idea will come, and I will think of how to develop it into a story. So story first, and then I will break it down into scenes, and each scene of my narrative will be prompted one by one.
So Nice Auntie building the complex world scene by scene, and she says idea first. Then we have Emmy from Tokyo.
Hi, my name is Emmy Sano. I'm a multidisciplinary artist collaborating with AI. So I use so many different AI tools. I use like Stable Diffusion. I found like all the AI, like all the version of Stable Diffusion, I still use it. And I also use Curator, the platform, and I also use Magnific AI and sometimes Midjourney, sometimes like Gemini and ChatGPT. I use everything, and I am spending lots of time on Photoshop. Like I use like Photoshop, like the part generating system, and I also like the color collection and everything. Yeah, so it's a lot of process, but I mainly make a fine-tuning model with my face and with my body data. And I combine with some of the old work. This is based on my original Office Ladies, and also I put the like old American photography roller. So yeah, it's like mixing models are really important. Sometimes important, more important than prompting. And for prompting, like I often use like Gemini or ChatGPT to optimize my ideas, because I start prompting in Japanese, so I translate it in English and also optimize it into like each generative system.
So this when you look at Emmy's work, you can always see her face, and what she just said about the fine-tuning is like teaching the model about like a specific face, for instance. And Genesis Kai.
So I believe the imagination is the most powerful way to create an image. So a lot of the images before they take place actually come from what I'm reading, anything from poetry, from history, to little memoirs that even I write, or diary entries. And from then, based on that, I photograph my own references, whether it's myself, people around me, or my environment. And from there, it's a starting point before I integrate things like AI and technology.
So she also talks about inspiration that comes from reading, and she works with her alter ego. So just talking to these 4 artists already brings like a huge range of completely different ways how how they start and how they approach the process. And Kevin, you just you just mentioned like you have a completely different process again. You once called it sculpting. So
yeah, while it's in my head, I was just thinking about it. I don't think there's anything I'm working, except for some early experiments and then occasional experiments. I mean, if I'm working with these tools, it's because I'm trying to create. I'm working on an image that I can't create with conventional photography for one reason or another. So it could be a financial reason, it could be a political reason, it could be a talent reason, it could be a physics reason. I mean, I always want to know, like, why are you why is it synthetic? Sometimes it's obvious. It doesn't mean that every AI image. I don't know. I don't actually AI. I fall into this thing. I don't even like calling it AI image, but every synthetic image, it doesn't need to look crazy or have some, it doesn't need to be surreal or, fall into the uncanny valley. If it does, and that's your intention, that's great. But I mean, they're really right. I mean, as an artist, I think too, like, should this thing I want to do, should it be a painting? Should it be a photo? Should it be a, it's again, is it the right tool for what you're trying to do? I mean, sometimes I think, I can think of a few examples. Well, if I wanted to do a portrait of my wife, for instance, I would just set up my camera and a light and boom, I'd take a portrait. Could I do an AI portrait of her too? Use the tool synthetic? Yeah, maybe she even likes that more. I don't know, but it's not easier, and it wouldn't occur to me to do it unless there were a reason, and I think there is something, by the way, as an artist, if you can find yourself in a position. So with okay, let me back up. So with diffusion models, which everything sort of is these days, some platforms allow you to create what's called a LoRa. And a LoRa is a really powerful kind of extension to the base model. So the base model, if you think of it, covers the whole world, and pretty much anything you can throw at it, it's got it. You want to, something that resembles a warehouse or an empty structure or a swimming pool or everything that could possibly come up. But you might have something like your own face or something else that you've created, an environment that you really want to preserve in its authentic sort of space. You might want to take a few hundred images of that and create a LoRa, this sort of submodel that bolts right onto the other model, and you tag it too. So you might say, Mark is the name, and then every time you put in Mark, even within the rest of this model's universe, Mark will look like Mark as you photographed Mark. And back to what we were talking about again about culture. I mean, I suppose over time it's going to improve, but how culturally sensitive are these models to, Congo versus Senegal versus Ghana versus, and you start seeing some pretty crazy biases. Sometimes they're biases in the most negative sense, but sometimes they're just biases of omission. They're just biases because there's not enough data there, or it wasn't tagged, and that's a weird kind of cultural phenomenon that I imagine over time it will be solved. I've actually been in meetings with people about would there be value in creating an African model, and there would be, of course there would be. I mean, ultimately I would hope that would get, it would all be in one big model, but sure. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I know that for ChatGPT because excuse me, Ethiopia is pretty much the only country that has its own native written language that's in use. So I know that for a lot of the tech guys, they've been inputting to ChatGPT. The more Ethiopians are inputting in our language, as you know, the more we aggregate and to get especially if you're doing translation and so forth. But everything requires input, and I think that for these models that what you're speaking about, I mean, I know there is a conversation in the US as it relates to representation. Is it only one-sided of those who have access to technology, and then how does that impact moving forward and so forth?
Absolutely.
And I think, but more importantly, I'm you know, the going back to this panel that I was on, it was a woman who was a nature photographer, and apparently there is a guy that is taking these images and animating them into moving images, and her whole thing was like,
Yatreda.
Pardon me?
Is it Yatreda? Is that her name?
No,
No?
I forgot. But anyways, I'll share with you later. But I was on the panel and I said, look, the box is open, AI is out. We need to find ways to make use of it. And what I thought was really interesting, this person was basically taking different nature photographers' work and animating it.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So my thing is like, okay, I find this interesting, but there is a much deeper conversation. And again, you know, we're going back to this whole thing about the Puritans, you know. It seems like in each phase we have these Puritan conversations without accepting that things are moving forward. I mean, we're here today, but 10 years from now, what is going to be the new thing? You know, we don't know that, but we can be for sure things are going to move forward within it. But as it relates to, you know, the art market and so forth, I wanted to know from you, I mean, do you think AI will reshape the global art market? Or how do you see that trajectory?
My impulse is to say no. I mean, the art, so also I'm, as much as I sort of know about the art market just because it's sort of connected to my whole world, I don't enjoy thinking about the art market so much. But and if you're to believe what you see in the papers, they say the art market is contracting, which I believe it is. But you know, they'll have an auction at Christie's. And because paintings only sold for 5 million and not 10 million, they'll say the art market is soft. I don't think that really concerns most of us, you know. The real question is, can an emerging artist or can a mid-career artist support themselves with their art? Well, that's a great question. I know that I'm in a minority of people who have been able to, and I'm super grateful for that. I work with artists, you know, and have friends who are artists all over the world, and I know that this is a struggle. A shocking piece of data I know from United States was that you know, a fraction of a percent of the people who identify as full-time artists in the United States make more than $10,000 US a year, and in the United States, that's well below the poverty line. So that was pretty shocking to me.
But it's not related to AI, right?
It's not related to AI. That's what I'm saying, is that it's already challenging enough without AI.
Yeah.
Now, how is AI going to transform it? I don't think it is. I mean, whether you have people whose fear of AI persists in all realms, or you have people who are more ready to accept AI, you're going to. I mean, I just can't imagine how it completely reshapes art. I mean, people said the same thing about the blockchain. They said the blockchain is going to completely democratize art, and suddenly everybody everywhere is going to have access to, as if there's this like torrent of money that's allocated for artists, and suddenly everybody's going to have access to it. No, come on. I think we all know as artists, it's a tough gig. It's a tough gig. Now, we talk about commercial art and we talk about, you know, fine art, which is essentially also commercial. If you want to support yourself with it, it's also commercial. And photography is funny. I always felt it was a little bit cruel to the commercial photographer, because it is very challenging, especially when, you know, the web emerged and you had a social media presence. I think it was challenging sometimes that you would have a practice as a commercial photographer, and then somehow, like on the side, be like, oh yeah, but I'm a fine art photographer. And they'd go online and they'd be like, well, all I see is a bunch of weddings you photographed, or a bunch of christenings or something, and now you're trying to tell me you're supposed to be in a museum. And so there was a real branding disconnect there that I always thought was dangerous. I managed to stay out of it completely, and I encourage some other people. I'm like, I don't know, use a pseudonym or something for your like wedding photography, because that when people are looking to you as a serious artist, that just somehow is not in sync. And is that fair? No. But do we have to be cognizant of how people perceive us? Yes. And even though people say branding is I've heard over the years people, when you talk about an artist and your brand, I've heard some people suggest, oh, that's vulgar, and you're thinking of yourself as a product. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but I think we are brands, and people are purchasing art, myself included, as a collector myself. I'll see an artwork, and I'll maybe have an affinity for it, but only after I meet the artist or I learn something about the artist. Suddenly, it's like, oh, I really want this now. And that's brand. I'm sorry, so I think we have to be super vigilant. And by the way, you're right. Like the world is really benefiting from the last, I'd say, 10, 15 years. Photography coming out of the African continent has been some of the most interesting stuff around. And by the way, after coming back from Paris Photo, I have to say, in general, it was really boring. I mean, I speak for myself. Like, it's great to see vintage prints and the masters and all that, which you don't see much of there. But all I want to see, this is myself. I just want to see something I haven't seen before. I want to see something that moves me in some way. It doesn't even have to be positive. I don't even have to like it. I just want to be impressed by it. That's where we are at this point, I think.
I think you need to come to Abidjan then to see the festival if you want to see something different.
So,
but
you're in Côte d'Ivoire.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, if I live in Paris, and I've been eating Ivory Coast food for the last 30 years, and I have to suffer eating this dehydrated, reconstituted atieke. If you can get me some fresh atieke, which I've only heard of, I've heard it's much better than the stuff that I eat. I'm on the next plane over there, let me tell you.
Don't worry, I'll invite you for that. But I mean, to just go back, everybody's laughing at you, by the way. No, but to go back to just your earlier comment was that I think, like, for a lot of photographers, not only in Africa but globally, for some reason we forget that at the end of the day our goal is to sell a commodity, which is the print,
Yes,
and
right.
And it's the print where the value starts, in my opinion, and for the archiving, for the physical element of it. And that's been always my frustration, when you talk about branding and so forth. I think some of the best artists are the best business people, that understand how to maintain a long career and so forth. So, but then even when you're talking about the art market, I mean, from my end, I'm well aware of this shrinkage because nobody's looking to buy a Picasso anymore. Everybody's looking to buy something that's gonna grow. And this is where the opportunity is for the Global South, because right now there's more eyes on us than ever before. And because of all this technology and this networking, is sort of to our advantage. And the only thing to me is just the accessibility to opportunities. This is where the big challenge is, to go into the international market. So, when you look at the different festivals in Europe and in the West, the big thing for me is that, Africa is like a fad, it's, we're just visible that one year, then we're not there the next year and so forth. But this is a global conversation that we're having on, image production at the end of the day.
I have heard that the paintings ran its core. Africa had a great run with painting. And from what I understand, because these most of the people collecting are not serious about art. They're just speculators. And so when the price of some of their favorite African painters kind of really went down with the rest of the market, suddenly, African painting. But I think African photography is hot as hell.
No, but even for the painting, what is this overpriced works that really kills the career of an artist. And that's one thing for a lot of, in my teaching and my mentorship, what I say is that you have to understand the business side of the market and how that is moving forward. But also you have to remember that often what we come across is we are artists just like anybody else. And sometimes we're selected to go into these European settings sort of as the exotic artist, wow, look. And there's a big danger in that because the viewer or whoever is selecting does not know what's actually happening on the ground, because it could be 20 of the same person, So that's why, like, when I jury a lot of these competitions, me, I'm looking at great photography. I don't care where it's from. So I'm not really into sort of doing favoritism. You know, obviously, as an African, I want to promote what's coming out of the continent, but we have to also bump up our standards and, you know, where we are marked in. And that's what when you were saying here about having just this Africa section, that's what we're trying to move away from.
I think that's that's exactly
You know,
what
for
you
example, you don't find Irish photographers only having an event, or Germans only, you know. So that's why it's always peculiar for me that Africa is always in this sort of bubble, you know, in the opportunity of diversifying and, you know, having in discourse, but we are trying to compete with the world, and that's the only way out. You know, we should be the best because we are competing with everybody and with the best. But there's one question from Prince for you. What he says is, who actually owns an image generated by artificial intelligence? The user who creates it, or the platform that provides the tool? And beyond that, could the rise of AI reduce economic value of the photography profession as well as the jobs connected to it?
From a fine art perspective, I don't think it would. If you're creating banal stock images, probably. And by the way, stock images put a lot of my friends out of business, but now they're suffering because of AI themselves, because instead of licensing for stock images, people are just spinning up, you know, banal images themselves. But I'm not really concerned with the world of banal images. As far as the copyright or the legal implications of generating with AI platforms, pretty much all of them say, like, you know, we don't own the work, you own the work. I think it's country by country, or the EU, United States. The general consensus now is that if you generate an image using an AI platform like Midjourney or ChatGPT, and you do nothing to it, this is where most of the courts have been going, I've noticed. Even if you curated it out of all the things you generated, unless you have, modified it in a I think there's even, like, you know, a substantial way or a meaningful way, or then nobody owns the human cannot own the copyright. I've seen that happen in the United States or the EU. I forget which one. But as long as it's undergone some modification, which most images do, and then you're into, like, well, what's that modification? And so it's not about, like, you know, distancing. It's not about removing it from something that was made from the images from a billion other people. It's just about human agency, I guess. They're trying to relate it to human agency. So if you, from what I understand, you can just do some color correction and move a few pixels around, but what I've heard, if for anyone who is actually concerned about this, they say, and I haven't done this, but the best practice would be to somehow kind of keep a record of your workflow. I mean, I don't know.
There are already tools out there that track the, like, but this is more for commercial work, like that you have the proof of all the steps that you did, which models you used, and so on. But there's a super funny story that happened in Berlin, where Boris Eldachsen, who's one of the artists that I interviewed, he made quite a famous image, the electrician, and he made this without any modification with Midjourney. So obviously, like, the rights are, authorship rights are not with him. And another artist, she painted the artwork, so she made a 101 painting copy out of that, and she said, so now I'm the owner of this image. And they did this in order to, like, start or spark this conversation about authorship and rights and so on. But I thought it was a very, very, very interesting activity.
Yeah, I mean, artists, we have it good in a way, because really at the end of the day, the serious collector, you know, they want the thing from the artist. They want that artist's signature. If it's not on the front, it's on the back. They want, you know, they want that touch. You know, and I don't know. I mean, sure, you can buy artworks for not a lot of money. You know, collecting art is not the domain just of people with financial wealth. Of course, everybody aspires to be the type of artist who is collected by people of substantial wealth, and at that level, yeah, it's like I don't think they're either into your work or they're not, and they want the real thing.
Well, let me quickly interrupt, because I think we are running out of time, and I really would like to show the other two questions that I collected the voices. If you're okay.
Yeah, go ahead, and then
I'll be back. Okay, I'll be right back.
Yeah, thank you. So the second question, and I'm rushing through that a bit. The second question was, what is your artistic question? And the reason why I've been bringing this to you is really to show the broad range of artistic practice that is out there, of artists incorporating AI, and there's way more than just writing a simple prompt and hitting go and everything's done.
So I use AI as a tool, but I also use AI as something that I like to investigate, interrogate. For what do we have here? What is this? Around us, every aspect of human life is getting affected by AI, and it has just started. So for me, it's the ideal subject to really try to discover what we are dealing with here, and to be using that same process. It's very meta. It's using that same process to find out what that process is all about. Is what makes it very interesting for me. What makes it also, I also feel that it's very much about now. I have been a photographer for 14 years, and I could make really nice images with a camera, but it was always, I knew at least 30, 40 photographers that I thought were better than me, because I could choose from any photographer in the last 100 years. And I won't say everything has been done with photography, but it's certainly a very well discovered terrains, and AI has just begun, and so it's I sometimes feel like a conqueror or a discoverer, when you have something that is as fresh as a.
So we have investigating the AI itself, and we have Maria.
All my work, photographic before the AI and then with AI, is all about how we relate with each other, how technology mediates relationships between humans, and how images and the way images change actually gives us a different understanding of the world. So every update of a technology really changes what we can understand about the world around us, and I'm very interested in these tensions.
So Maria, on relation and how images change our understanding of the world, and that's nice aunties.
So my work is basically building a parallel universe called the Antiverse, and the guiding question for this project is my attitude towards aging, and also to understand auntie culture, like why do aunties behave the way they do, and what kind of auntie do I want to become when I grow up.
Yeah, so nice aunties about aging and what kind of auntie she wants to become. So here is the wall of family wall, and this is Boris Eldachsen from Berlin.
My artistic interest has not changed in the last 15 years. It's the human condition, it's the working of the mind. So my approach is psychological, and I think this can be done much better with AI, because in AI you can show things that are invisible just by imagining it and translating it into a prompt.
Yeah, Boris is always working on human conditions and unconsciousness. So I think I skip the this part, but I would like to show you the third question, how images find closure. So the question to the artist was, how do you relate to your images when they come out of your process? And how do you know they are finished? Because many of them work in iterations, and when do you say it's done? And we start with Boris.
Also, the relationship to the images did not change. I still truly believe that I am the author because my process is quite complex and often it takes 50 or more steps to get to the final result. And they're like all my children.
So talking about complex authorships?
I think when I encounter the image, it's always a mix of contempt, but also shock. Because when working with AI, it's very different. Photography is by principle, even though it's my starting point, it's subtraction. What is excluded outside the frame allows you to tell the truth by withholding. And AI, on the other hand, is the addition and the averages of all of these things being added in. So these two things that are two completely polarizing aspects of image making and making the form of an image are always giving me unexpected results. So I feel like I learn more about myself rather than my own alter ego sometimes.
So this was Genesis Kai talking about polarizing aspects of image making. And we have Ken Broad again.
Again, very, very intuitive. I create hundreds and thousands of images that I have no particular feeling with, or the feeling lasts very short. And sometimes I fall in love with one of my outputs, and it grows on me, or it doesn't. And that's the way, kind of intuitively, I select the ones that I think vocalize what I have to say, or express who I am. And it's those ones that stay, and the other ones they disappear.
So falling in love with the outputs as...
This is something I can't really barbarize accurately. It's a really hard question. Yeah, for this Office Lady series, I think I generated more than 1,200 images, and also like I make lots of different patterns for Office Ladies, and pouring tea, like working done, and shopping, like so many like different situations. But I think, I don't know, I just speak to my gut. And I think that is something only human can do. The curating is really like a important process.
Yeah, and I think this is a very important point that we did not touch today. Curation as part of the process, and the idea of this being something deeply human. Yeah, and I think with this we can close again with the guiding sentence.
So to me, just the question I wanted to ask Kevin is that when you're exhibiting the work, because you're going, just like the rest of us, from the digital to the physical to the analog. Yeah. My question to you is that how are you editioning your work? I mean, that aspect of it, if you can just speak a little bit on it, because for a lot of photographers, their question, because a lot of them are making this type of, they're making these generated images, but then to try to find the opportunity to showcase and to take it to the next level, which is the selling point. But how are you editioning and how are you packaging yourself up?
Great question. Well, so many years ago, in an effort in a further effort to not be called a photographer, I chose not to edition my photographic work in the sort of conventional way. And what that meant was that I actually had unique works, or sometimes I would do one plus an artist proof. But today, because I actually do want people to look at this work as photography, I'm going the other way, and I want people to see it as photography. And you could call this natively digital, but it's not natively digital for me in the same way that a video is. A video has to be seen on a monitor. It's the only way you're going to see it. Whereas, because I'm still thinking like a photographer, and I'm thinking as somebody who doesn't always want to view an image, shot at me light vectors shooting at my eyes. I like reflected light off a surface. And, still when I see my works printed on the big wall, it's sometimes it's like I've seen them for the first time. It is like I've seen them for the first time. It's just a completely different experience. And now I'm creating, knowing that that's going to be the output. If I knew that the output for whatever reason needed to be a screen, probably massage things a little differently and optimize for different things. But I'm optimizing for knowing that this work will be printed, and that's how I want it to. That's its sort of resting state. So I'm doing. We did 3 + 2 artist proofs is what I did. Now I do that because I think maybe where I am in my career and with some of the clientele I have, they want something that's rarer. I don't like this idea. And of course, all of this scarcity is human made. It's all artificial, the scarcity, because I could just as well print 1,000 images as I do 3. But that's that thing where we create a sort of an artificial scarcity. And with photography, it can be editions of 10, editions of 25, editions of 50. I think it really sort of depends. I think you have to make a choice. It's a financial choice more than anything. I can sell. Okay, I know these numbers are out of control, so bear with me. I'm not trying to flex either, but let's say I have an image that sells for $100,000 US. And if that were a unique piece, there is a sort of a logic that says, well, if you did an edition of 3 + 2 artist proofs, which means it's really an edition of 5, you would divide that 100,000 by 5, and then you would say, well, now it's 20,000. And that is sort of a conventional logic that people use. And it means that now collectors who have no intention of buying something for 100,000 or 50,000, but max out at 20,000 maybe, suddenly they're like, okay, that's in my realm. And now you can take some zeros off that and scale it to wherever you are in your career, reality. But so, you don't want to give away a work. You don't want to give away a work for maybe $50, but if it's an edition of 100, well, that's 5,000. So you kind of have to play with those numbers, I think, to whatever makes you comfortable. What I will say.
Sorry, no, because the one thing, this is a big question globally for photographers because they're existing only in the digital realm. So even, we print the festival here, and the one thing I realized that also a lot of photographers don't know the files that they have, and
Sure.
what we can push the file and so forth. But the one advice that I always tell young photographers is that when you're starting out, it's important to be collected, to get your work into the hands.
Yes.
Because there's some emerging talent that want to charge crazy amount of money, and nobody's buying
That's right.
that.
That's right.
Conservative approach to the entry into the market, and then as you build up, then you increase the valuation of your work.
For sure. Yeah.
I need to take the chance to say, and if you're an emerging artist working with AI and you want to get printed, you can you can take part of our next open call.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's I probably did myself a disservice in a way by I took a position early on. I was pricing my work high. Now I chose to price there was a logic to it. I was doing a lot of commissions, and my commissions were high. So when someone wanted to buy an existing work of mine, I was relating it to this very high price I was getting for my commissions, even though that was a false logic, but that was my logic, and it stuck. Now what it meant was, if I just sold you something for 5,000, well, I can't sell to your friend next week for 2,000. But your friend can't afford 5,000. So it's like then you price yourself so high. It's like that thing you talked about with the painters. The speculators drove their prices so high, it was like a curse. Well, I kind of cursed myself in a way, because it meant that my collector base was rather small, and it would have been useful. I mean, I'm not complaining either, but it would have been useful maybe to have more collectors early on. Yeah. NFTs actually solved that for me. Not that I think there's too much of a future in NFTs, but I mean, I went from having probably 300 people collecting my work to like 30,000. But of course, they, yeah, that was a different. I don't know if that'll ever come back, but if you were around in 2021, it was wild.
Yeah, that was a different beast. And even for me,
Yeah.
I was getting requests to make NFT from my work, and I said I want to see where this lands first.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of artists in Africa decided to start doing the whole NFT thing, and the issues that came up is that the collectors that have been collecting their works, then the question was raised, what was the point of me purchasing an original work that's editioned when you're going to duplicate into the NFT existence? So for some artists, it was problematic in that sense.
Some people, yeah, some artists say like, I'm not gonna, yeah, if it's a physical work, I'm not gonna make an NFT, and if it's an NFT, I'm not gonna make a physical. Because if you do make a physical and then you sell it to somebody, that's someone who, or even give it to the person with the NFT, well, they can decouple it, keep the NFT, and sell the print, and then what's the relationship?
And that's the thing. I mean, we're in a very small market in the sense that everybody knows, you know, what's going on and so forth and what have you. And even when I was asking about edition work, is that you know, I always tell photographers, if you're done selling that edition, do not do backdoor deals to sell more of it, because the market will find out, and it's the killer of your career.
Artists do this all the time. You hear these stories and they think they're being clever and they do something behind their gallery or whatever, and it just doesn't add up. It's not, it's just not the way to do it. The people shooting themselves in the foot all the time. I mean, look, you know, it's a rough game. It's like, you know, it's not a meritocracy. You know, you don't get successful because you do great work, whatever great work means. There are so many elements that go into commercial success as an artist. And, you know, and then when it's, you know, sometimes I'll meet an artist, I don't want to name names, but a couple of famous artists, I meet them. And then I like, I get it now. Just so likable, just such a lovely, likable person. Like, you know, it's like, and you realize like, you know, not everybody is built for that type of, you know, persona.
Yeah.
But and then others are absolutely unapproachable, and people are interested in that mystique, and you know, I don't know.
Yeah, no, but okay. So I would like to see if, so, I mean, the good thing about this session, it's recorded, because it's something that we distribute within the network. So all the various sessions that we have, we're going to put it up, because as I mentioned to you, one of the challenges for us is network. So sometimes calls drop or it's choppy and what have you. So over the years, we've understood like recording these is important. So I appreciate the time that both of you guys have put in. Kevin, you need to come to me, as I told you. So
I can smell that fresh, warm atieke already. You know, always atieke before rice. Don't talk to me about rice. Don't talk to me about jollof, anything. I want some atieke. Simple as that.
Okay, there's some Nigerians in this here, so I don't know.
Oh yeah, well, you know,
so
we'll talk Nigeria, because I actually do love a good jollof rice.
So just going to the question session, does anybody in the group have a question? Just press the hand button to raise your hands, and then I'll call on you, or put it in the group. Mike, did you have any last minute things to say? Maybe you should talk about this competition, and because I mean, the way that we met was, you know, your big question was you were trying to find artists working with AI in Africa, and to connect you within that. So I mean, speak about what.
Yeah, maybe that would be worth sharing 1 or 2 minutes about our open call. So in January we will have the next open call. The basic idea is that the open call is really completely open, so there is no fee and no topic or anything involved. So whatever you want to share with us, you're very open. We're very happy. There is a platform where you can register and upload your work, and then we have an amazing jury. We are super proud. We will announce the jury for number 3 very shortly, but we are very, very happy to have these professionals from very different areas together, and they will have a look at this at these works, and then they will curate the magazine out of those works. And there will also be a couple of special like one thing we think is super interesting, to capture the whole range of these different jury members that we have is each jury member can select one artwork. We call this the golden ticket that will be in the magazine, no matter what the other jury members, if they like it or hate it. And the jury member is going to write an essay about it, and we're going to print the artwork, take it to exhibitions. So I think this is also attractive to everyone to contribute to that. And we would be very, very happy to get more submissions from Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess nobody has any questions. There's a lot to digest based on, oh, wait a minute. There's one from Mohammed. So Mohammed is asking for a documentary photography. So I will come back to, who is Ghana must go? Anyways, so one of the questions is for documentary photography projects. Could the use of AI for a place or area that no archive image for it and nobody covers it? Mohammed, can you get online and ask your question? I'm having.
I heard it. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Maybe if he verbalizes it. Yeah.
Mohammed, you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah.
So what's your question?
It's about like the documentary project that about like a place or area that it's changed and it looked like different right now, and it was full of green and now it's full of gray. And nobody archives this picture before, how it was look like before, and only now people take a picture right now, or I'm taking a picture right now for it for right now only. But before that, I need to bring back how it was look like and show after and before and how it look like and how this change affects the area.
Sure. Well, I think that's absolutely perfect use, as long as you have a little caption on the bottom that says recreated, using AI. The other thing is, are there any paintings of this? Because there's some fantastic ways you can, if you wanted to, you could take a painting and turn it into a photo using a style transfer. But yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't. I mean, they do that all the time in documentaries. They recreate things. Yeah.
Actually, the idea of painting and rephotograph is much better for me, because I'm a little bit old school, so I like more to I a lot of people around me convince me to go for AI and use it, but I'm still no, I'm a little back from the past.
Well, you could just use the painting. You don't. It doesn't need to even be photographic. Or you want it, or you want the camera moving through the environment.
No. I think it's a very good idea about painting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Sure.
Okay, there was one other person that had a question. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So my network has been quite unstable. I don't know if my question has already been answered or asked, but I'm still going to ask regardless. So my question is, at what point does a creation become AI generated? Is it solely the product of autonomous AI, or can human AI collaboration also be classified as AI made work? That's the first question. The second question is, as AI generated images become more realistic, what's the future of authenticity in photography? And the third and last question is, can AI-driven photography redefine the notion of truth in visual representation? Thank you.
Second question I heard. First question I didn't get the beginning of it.
Okay, so at what point does a creation become AI generated? Is it solely the product of autonomous AI, or can human AI collaboration also be classified as AI made work?
Yeah. So, well, just to answer that, that's why I don't like saying, oh, that's an AI image, because that diminishes the artist's agency in the process using the thing as a tool. That's like you make a painting and you're like, oh, well, you could say that's a painting, but it's not that, because you're talking about it like it was made by AI. It's made with AI. So, and then of course, I mean, here's the thing too, is that just because part of the image is synthetic doesn't mean all of it is. You might start with an image of, I keep talking about cows. You might start with an image of a cow, and then everything you build out around it is synthetic, in which case you might call it a hybrid, synthetic image. So I think there are no real rules. I think the main concern should just be that you get the image you want, and then figure out how you're going to describe it later on.
Okay.
And I think also it's about the application or the use of, because obviously if you're talking about news and capturing moments of history and so forth, you know, I believe that it's the same thing as Photoshop, you know, what the Photoshop you use determines how far you are from creating a new universe or capturing the reality, you know. So I think you have to be very clear of what you're presenting and for what purpose. This is what it comes down to. What was the second question, Daniel?
As AI-generated images become more realistic, what's the future of authenticity in photography?
Well, that is a great question. And I think that goes, something I say a lot lately is, you know, what people say, oh, this future you're describing where you can't believe anything you see or hear, that's so dystopian and depressing. And I already said that I think it, you know, it's going to help us, you know, critically analyze media and content in a way maybe we've forgotten how to. But the real question I like to ask is, what is the future like where we can't trust anything we see or hear, and does it matter? And now that sounds provocative. Like, what do you mean it doesn't matter? Of course it matters. Well, okay, it matters because we're born into a world where we've just become really comfy trusting this news outlet or this relative or this group of people that you know, it really shakes us at our core of our notions about truth. And the more you start to dissect truth, you know, you start to realize that you know, absolute truth is a bit abstract, and there's your truth and my truth, there's universal truth, God's truth, this, you know, what is truth to begin with? So when you talk about authenticity, like, what does that mean to you? What do you, is it something you're going to miss? Or is it something you're going to recognize as missing? Once you understand that that thing is missing, is that going to, you know, so I think we have to sort of look at it from a practical standpoint. You know, I don't know, maybe the photograph as we know it becomes this really like charming, nostalgic, quaint thing like tintypes and you know, pick your daguerreotypes and stuff like that.
No, today I posted a quote from Picasso where he said, art is a lie that makes you realize the truth. Yeah. So everything is about references and the purpose.
One more thing I just didn't get in earlier, it's tied into some of my work, is as I get older, and I don't think you have to be old, but your memory starts to fade. Have you ever, you know, thought about a place that maybe you grew up or you visited when you were younger, and you have this idea of it? And you really, oh, I remember I was so great. And you go back years later and you go there and you're like, oh, it's not as I remember it. And it's not even because the place like changed in any, you know, obvious way. It's just not the way you remember it. You have your ideals, and yet I could create maybe a synthetic image, or you could create a synthetic image more likely, that embodies that feeling. Now, what matters? What matters, the technical accuracy of that place and that memory you had, or the way it made you feel? And I would argue the latter is more important. And I did a whole series of images in Los Angeles like that, and people from Los Angeles look at it. They know those places don't exist. The thing is called Somewhere in Los Angeles, and these places don't exist. But they say, but at the same time, I've been there. I know that place. You've got it. That's exactly how I remember it. And so then we get into wonderful conversations that you can have, you know, a nice pot of tea at night and discuss with your friends about what's real and what's not.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. And what was the third question that you had? I think that was the third one.
Can AI-driven photography redefine the notion of truth in visual representation?
Well, you know, I think that, yes, I think, again, I'm the first to say truth is an abstract idea, honesty, these are intangible things that have a lot of, you know, it's your relationship to the truth and honesty is sort of what matters. And so I think, in my experience, I've encountered not just truth and honesty imbued in synthetic images, but I'm blown away as someone who has spent most of my adult life looking humans in the face intimately and feeling that human presence. it shocks me still when I create the occasional synthetic portrait and I sense that presence. That just blows me away. It makes no logical sense. And I'm still investigating this.
Okay, so is there any more questions from you guys? I don't think there is. Yeah, so thank you very much. I mean, this is super fascinating, and
Right.
I think I'm curious to know how the conversation will shift over the years as well, because
Yeah.
I was at the Washington Post when the transition from analog to digital entered,
Oh,
and the old heads were like so far, as you remember the first digital cameras were not
I
so
do.
cute,
No.
you know, they were not cute at all, and
No.
and having to learn, you know, because I'm the generation of analog. I started in the dark room, so
Sure.
my sort of my idea of photography, you know, it's well developed in the sense that I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in the dark room. And one thing I realized is it's about the relationship and the connection that you have with the tools that you have. So I think in each phase, you know, we have to learn new things, but the most important thing, and I think, Mike, with all the videos that you shared, and I don't know if you know, the folks on here really listen to it, everything starts with an idea, and that idea has to come from you. And when you look at the process of each artist, it's basically the process for any photographer. Because for me, I start my process on a piece of paper, you know, which is inspired, informed by other ideas, and I go from the paper into the digital form, you know, and then I come back into the paper on its final sort of a final output. So in the end, it's I think what will happen with AI is that it's going to require more imagination, more creativity, because it will be oversaturated. And what will stand out is the people that are really using it as a tool of self-expression. And this is just another tool that is in our system.
Exactly. Great.
So, Mike.
Well, I think that was a perfect closing word. I couldn't say it better, but yeah, thank you so much for having us. It's really a pleasure and a big honor to be here.
No, thank you so much. I mean, you're the one that really changed my view on this. So this is why I wanted to have you. And I think a lot of photographers in Africa are asking these questions and want to hear from you know, folks that are inside of it and to have a better understanding about it. But thank you so much, everybody.
Sure.
So looking forward to catching up, and then we'll go from there.
Great.
All right. So we're gonna log out. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.